This is Dateline News and Conversation Live. Got an incredible show tonight with very esteemed guests. Um, you've met most of them before, but tonight we have Jan Sarnogorski, we have
Hello.
Kostas Isikas, we have Blush Kaucic, and Hendrik Weber. Friends, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Nice
You
to be
know,
here.
well, thank you. I am so grateful to each of you for being participants in this show. Um, the views and opinions that you share have been very much appreciated by people who watch this show. And tonight, there's so much we could talk about, but I think I want your comments on the United States Congress just approved a spending bill to send $61 billion that'll be split between Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. And the US and the EU have been trying to figure out how to steal $300 billion worth of Russian assets that are in Western countries. I also want to talk about Hungary's Viktor Orban. What a renegade. The topic will be, and I want your opinions on this as Europeans, EU leadership must go. So let's go to the first topic. I'd like your opinions on what you think people in your country, Europeans in general, are thinking about these two things. First of all, wanting to seize Russian assets and what the implications are for this about trust, faith, and confidence in the United States around the world. I'm going to begin tonight with a good friend, Jan Sarnogorski. Jan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, the say ordinary people in Slovakia, and probably not only in Slovakia, do not understand the problems connected with taking the Russian assets. Yes, but of course, these matters are decided not by ordinary people, but practically elite of in various countries, and this elite or the decision of the this time of the American Congress and American president is just stealing the alien money. And that means that if US did make it right now, this practice will be spread to many countries in the world, and sooner or later it will it will reach the United States themselves, and the United States, the Americans will lose their money in other countries, and that should have yes think about it, have thought about it, the Americans before they made this decision.
Jan, I have to ask you, related to that, do you think that if they do steal those assets, it will speed up the de-dollarization, which is already going on and increasing speed? So do you think it'll speed up this process of getting rid of the US dollar for the international currency?
Of course, because it is a very very clear uh, display that the money in America are not in the safe haven. and the people would seek another countries where their money could deliver, because they would be not sure that they would not lose their money if they have them in the United States. And because uh, delivering alien money to the United States is so important for the American, not only economy, but already for the existence of the American, of the America as superpower. That by this step, the American government and president have made very bad step and decision for their own future.
Thank you, Jan. Kostas, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that, as Jan said, the assets, the Russian assets in the Western world, you have to see the big picture. I listened yesterday to some of the news regarding the ultimatum that the United States gave to China regarding TikTok, which is a worldwide application in the social media, and they told them that it would be cut off in the United States unless the Chinese owners would sell TikTok to Western interests. Uh, can you imagine if we turned this around and we had this ultimatum from China to United States saying that a United States corporation would not be able to operate in China unless it would be sold to Chinese interests, or vice versa? Um, this is a constant crumbling of diplomatic, political, and economic international relations. And this is a very dangerous step in the world for peace and war. So in Europe, just to sum it up, as Jan said, in Slovakia, in Greece also, the ordinary people are getting more and more concerned on the regionalization of the military conflict in Europe. It's not only a military conflict in Ukraine, but it's also an international economic conflict concerning the whole world. So you see, the United States, along with its decision, which it took a couple of days ago on this military aid to these three countries, Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, along with the economic packages of seizing perhaps assets from Russia, threatening China on TikTok, and who knows what else. It has opened Pandora's box, as we say in Greece. And once this box is open, and I don't know how we will be able to control the dangers that will multiply at an incredible speed in the crumbling of international diplomatic and economic relations. Look at what happened in Damascus when Israel bombed a diplomatic mission in Iran. We have never seen this before in such a way that it seems just natural or logical to happen. So whether it's economic, military, diplomatic, this whole package of the United States and Washington leaders to bring the world to a new age of confrontation without any precedent is incredibly dangerous for all of humanity.
Thank you, Kostas. Over to you, Blaž.
Okay, I would try to propose looking at these two very important issues. You have proposed the $60 billion bill aid for Israel and Ukraine, and the threats to seize Russian assets in a little bit broader context. I agree with what was said so far. Maybe I would like to add that globalists have proclaimed and kicked off a total hybrid war on humanity and nature with the COVID-19 project in 2019. So far, all major players are playing their part. National states are just performers on a stage. Now, is seizing Russian state assets wrong? Yes, it's wrong. Is it illegal? Yes, it is illegal. Is it against the prevailing rules-based international order? Sadly, no. The rules are set by the global controllers according to their preferences. We, the individuals who know more than the average citizen, let's say, are deciding at each provoking event, like, for instance, seizing of Russian assets, how deep we shall go with our analysis and how consequential we want to be. Mainstream media are anyway to be understood as a military force. Alternative media cover a wide spectrum of conformism. It is not hard to criticize seizing Russian assets, but most of the commentators of international financial affairs, like also the new $60 billion bill for Israel and Ukraine, are prisoners of the dogma of money. In fact, what does it mean practically? In fact, believing that those who are financing those trillions, the creditors, have initially earned the money and then lent it to states, companies, and people. This is believing in dogma of money. What the controllers, those in power, have really conquered and mastered, it was not earning the value, the money, but they have monopolized power to emit money out of thin air and use it to enslave and parasitize the world. No American presidential candidate has spoken clearly and correctly on the subject. Hope remains that Russia and China will find a way to retain monetary sovereignty and propose a clearing-based international financial system, eliminating American dollar or any other national currency as a privileged reserve currency. CBDC is even worse idea than the dollar so far.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Blush. Henrik, what are your thoughts?
First of all, I want to say I agree completely with what my colleagues said already. The spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Russia, Maria Zakharova, said in a statement, military aid to the Kiev regime is direct sponsoring of terrorism activities. Maybe I personally would not use the term terrorism activities, but it's at least sponsoring the war against Russia, of course. And the next question is, if Ukraine get this money, it's stolen money. My colleagues already mentioned that. But when they get this $16 billion, what did they want to buy for these dollars? There are no weapons to buy on the market. The money will not go to families, poor families along the front line to build up their houses again. This money probably will go in pockets of oligarchs, not only in Ukraine, but also in other countries. So it doesn't matter for Ukraine. They cannot win the war only with these $60 billion because you cannot buy personnel or troops of that. You cannot buy military equipment. So that money is lost already. The other thing, it's of course a double standard from our Western side. If we would be really honest, we would not only send money, we would send our own troops. But if, for example, Norway, Germany, other countries would send their troops on the ground, if we really think that it's most important that Ukraine wins against the new Hitler in Moscow, what would happen if the first body bags with dead Norwegian soldiers would come back to Norway? Then it would end immediately, because that we cannot handle this situation. As long as Ukrainian troops and young boys die, it doesn't matter. So the only reason why they sent this aid package to Ukraine is maybe to hold this whole game going on until the presidential election in November. Otherwise, I cannot understand why they want to send this money, because it's lost already.
Yeah, good thoughts from everybody. I've read where that money probably won't even go to oligarchs. Most of it will be dumped right back into the American military-industrial complex to make more weapons that basically and fundamentally the United States needs. And then, of course, a certain amount, Hendrik, as you mentioned, will trickle through to Zelensky, oligarchs, right back into American oligarch pockets or members of Congress. We've talked about this in the past, how several key players from the United States, from Joe Biden on down to Victoria Nuland, have probably profited incredibly well from siphoning off that money. And the interesting thing is, and for me as an American living abroad, like you, I've been watching this process of de-dollarization. And I think most of the American people probably are not even aware, couldn't believe that this could possibly happen. But there certainly are people in the United States who are key players like JP Morgan, the large banks, and other people with huge financial holdings in dollars have got to realize that this could happen. My last thought on this, Hendrik, I'll pick up on what you said. I think the pressure is really on the Democrats and Biden to not appear to have lost this war in Ukraine with an election coming up in November. I think they're really, really struggling. All right, let's move on. Oh, by the way, Hendrik, Maria Saharova, the spokesperson for the foreign ministry, she did issue a dire warning to the United States. She said it'll be a humiliating fiasco and that America would regret it. I mean, these are pretty strong words coming from the spokesperson for Lavrov and the foreign ministry. And you know that they don't speak independently of the Kremlin. So you get these warnings on different levels. And by the way, even Medvedev, he mocked the vote to give more money. He said the vote of the gleeful American bastards will only prolong the fighting and increase the number of victims of the war, as Hendrik just said. You got to hand it to Medvedev. Putin's a good cop. Medvedev playing the role of the bad cop, I guess, the thug and the diplomat. All right. Now you're all living in European countries. Viktor Orban has been really outspoken in the last few months about NATO's involvement in Ukraine. He's been very outspoken about the leadership in the EU, unelected. I want your comments, and I'll start with you, Hendrik, on Viktor Orban said NATO is one step closer to sending troops to Ukraine. And he said all of the EU leadership must go. Hendrik, my goodness, this is incredible, but I'm wondering if Viktor Orban might now be in political and worse trouble.
What should I say? The answer is really easy. He's completely right. That's it. Of course, there are popping up new Adolf Hitlers and dictators everywhere, and of course, Viktor Orban is one of the most evil dictator in the whole European Union. If you read our newspapers, but he's completely right. He's caring about his people and his country, I think, and you cannot say that he is a Kremlin puppet or a friend of Putin. He's sometimes talking against Kremlin policies, but it looks at least like he's caring of his country. And when he talks about the corrupt European Union, there is no doubt that the European Union and, for example, Ms. von der Leyen is the most corrupt person who's ever been in charge in Germany, in her positions there, or in the European Union. We have this. We have had all these pandemic things where she writes not emails at least, text messages from her phone backwards and forwards, and make contracts for billions of euros by text messages from her phone, and now all these messages are disappeared. So she's completely corrupt and completely crazy. Of course, they have to go all these guys who were there in charge in the European Union. So from my point of view as a Norwegian, not member of the European Union, for me, the whole European Union can crumble. So I never want to be that our country, my country, is a part of the European Union.
Well, thank you for that honest appraisal, Henrik. Blaž, your thoughts?
Okay, maybe first a thought on what you said before on Medvedev. I like the new personality of Medvedev. I like this personality much more than the one of a staunch neoliberal years ago. Now, Medvedev's statements often hit hard and to the point. Let's hope that the national spirit such statements represent grows and strengthens in Russia. In spite of intensive psychological war against the people of European Union, I'm sure that most of us reject war with Russia, and even more want to see cooperation with Russia get re-established. Now to the question of Viktor Orban's statement. At present, as I see the situation, Hungary and Slovakia are most commonsensical nations in Europe, at least their leadership. I wish them all the best and hope they will develop comprehensive programs for defense and liberation. So far, they only show partial understanding of the existential crisis and react only to isolated problems, not their systemic causes. I would respectfully disagree with Orban. Nothing will change if EU leadership goes. This leadership has only played the henchman role. European Union must go. It cannot be improved. It is a super-fascist entity. European Central Bank must go. Europe should develop peaceful, active cooperation based on interests of sovereign states and their citizens. NATO must go.
Wow. Blaž, always so insightful, getting to the root causes of what's going on. As an American, I recall, and having lived and traveled throughout Europe when it was not the European Union, how these countries have lost their sovereignty. They're even losing their culture. They've lost their own currencies. And as an American, I was really surprised because I thought, how terrible is this that countries are losing their sovereignty. And I think my feeling, and I think I agree with you, Blush and Hendrik, I'd like to see the EU completely disappear, and that the states and the individual states in across the European Union would return to their individual sovereignty. Um, Kostas, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that what Orban said on the European Union is about 10% right, and I agree with Blaj. The European Union is a political structure which is non-democratic. It's a neo-colonialist structure, and the people who are being colonized, since we're out of colonies outside of Europe, Latin America has gone independent or semi-independent in any case. The same with Africa and the Arab world and Asia. So the new colonized people in Europe are the Europeans and the European nations. And it's not a country which is the boss, but it's a superpower of hidden figures, very entangled with economic superpower. So the architecture of the European Union lacks any type of democratic reality. The people in the European Union do not vote for the leaders of the European Union. The leaders of the European Union are the result of an equation which is corruption plus obscurity of what is happening behind the curtain. As Henrik mentioned, the texts and the messages between von der Leyen and Albert Bourla, who is a Greek American, unfortunately, the CEO of Pfizer, never came out of the picture. It's not on the light. It's been hidden. It's been put away. The people of Europe know this. So there is a lack of any type of trust. What Orban said is perhaps truth for 10 years ago, but now it's not a question of the European leaders must go. It's a question of the European structure of the European Union, which is now not only a political structure, but it's also a NATO European Union alliance, a civic military structure, which is very dangerous to the European people. Look what the Polish Prime Minister said a few weeks ago, or what Borrell has said about that we must get used into perhaps a war, or what Anna Baerbock said in Germany about the perspectives of a war in Europe. We must get accustomed to the idea. So it's not a question of the leaders getting rid of the leaders, getting rid of the structure, a non-democratic dictatorial structure, which prevents people not only in having total freedom, but even thinking in ways that thought is a democratic procedure, because we must take into account that media dictatorship, along with all the economic situation which is being created within the European Union, the militarization of the European economy, in Germany, for example, and also in Greece and many other European countries, to do what? To provide weapons a year from now or 8 months from now, when the front of which is almost 1,200 kilometers between Russia and Ukraine will not exist anymore, because the Ukrainians are fed up in fighting a useless war, a useless battle, a useless death against the Russian brothers, because these are brother and sister people. It's not a question of two different countries because they have deep, difficult relations, geographical grab outs and things like that. So I do believe that the question mark, European Union, do we need it? Well, it's a burden for humanity and a burden for the European people. The European Union is a garbage hole for things to be put in. And I am very fearful that the United States imperialist strategy wants to create another theater of destruction and war, and a new Cold War in the European Union, between the European Union and the Russian Federation. And this is the big question mark for the European people. They must not accept this dictate of Washington and converting the European Union into another war theater in the near future. We must say no to all of this perspectives, which are dreadful for all the European nations and the European people.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kostas. It seems to me, and you mentioned, so far all of you have mentioned that the European Union, the whole concept of it has to go. But what seems to me what's happening with the agreement of the European Union, the Council of Leaders, is the United States is also destroying the European Union, its economy, its civic life. America, I don't know how many bases, there's dozens of US bases occupying most European countries. It's an occupation. And it is not about the defense of Europe, the European Union. It really, I think, is about exploitation. And I feel that's very sad. And I don't think that the United States would like to see the return to individual sovereign states. Anyway, before I go to Jan, what I think is so important about the four of you, you're very well respected. You're considered experts. You can articulate the geopolitical realities that are so important for regular, ordinary people to understand. And each of you does such a good job of that. Jan, your thoughts on what we're talking about here, the European Union.
Thank you. First to Viktor Orban. Yes, Viktor Orban is right, but it is not so easy because practically European people do not decide about the leadership of the European Union. It is more completely, but I would not now speak more in detail about it. But the words of Viktor Orban sound as a electoral slogan because in mid-June, that means in 2 months practically, will take place the elections into European Parliament. I repeat, the European Parliament does not decide about the European Commission or European leadership, but of course it would be better if the more or even majority of members of European Parliament would decidedly fight for European freedom. But back to state of European Union. First, present European Union is not the same European Union as it was established 50 or more years ago, because in that time the founders of European Union thought that European Union would unite free people of Europe, just leaving them their freedom and making it possible to make free commerce, etc. But everything that has changed in the decade, especially after 30 years ago, after collapse of Eastern Bloc, and practically now the United States are a leader of the European Union, and the best example is that when 2 years ago or so, the pipeline Nord Stream was exploded in Baltic Sea, and even German government. Germany is together with Russia the main owners of Nord Stream pipeline, and German government was not moved enough to announce who did who is behind the explosion. Yes, of course, behind the explosion must be United States and more or less the United Kingdom as well, because such explosion cannot do some private company of adventurers. But yes, President Biden has few days before explosion practically forecast that yes, we American government we do something that North Stream would not work, and yes, it is not working, and probably will not work in the future. For Europe, and Europe has practically must has stopped buying relatively cheap Russian gas, and is buying the 3 times more expensive American gas, and that's European Union, and nobody can say anything against it. That's why, back to words of Viktor Orban, the if the European Commission would be changed, say after elections into European Parliament, it would be a first step toward that European Union would behave itself more freely. And yes, of course, behind it must member countries of European Union must uh, their relations must be good. And I can say as 2 examples touching Slovakia. Slovakia and Czech Republic have yes split Czechoslovakia, but relations between Czech Republic and Slovakia are very good, and the relations between peoples of Slovakia and Czech Republic are better than in Czechoslovakia. Yes, now there is a problem between Czech government, present Czech government and Slovak government, but yes, after next elections, probably in Czech, at least in the Czech Republic, that could come back to good relations. And uh, another example are relations between Slovakia and Hungary. You know, Slovakia relations between Slovakia and Hungary were a little bit tense for a long time, but now again, Slovakia is an more or less ally of Hungary in European Union, partly also inside of NATO, and relations between Slovakia and Hungary and Slovak people and Hungarian people are better and better. That's why European Union can go get to or to think about another form of European integration, or uh, profound reform of European Union. The European countries and Europeans people must think in good relations among each other.
You know, I learned so much from all of you. But now I want to pose this question to you, not for long, extensive answers, but maybe very brief, even yes or no. Um, as I look at the BRICS movement, it's growing rapidly. And there are, who knows, maybe a couple dozen more countries standing in line and wanting to apply to join the BRICS movement. Now, the BRICS movement is based on, if nothing else, the sovereignty, respect, and dignity of all countries and civilizations. It's stated very clearly. In fact, China has stated it very clearly. And I believe that Russia is really the one who's leading this movement. Do you think, this is my question to each of you now, and I'll start with Jan and we'll go back. Do you think that someday, if the BRICS movement continues to grow and be successful, and they no longer use the dollar as the international currency, they set up their own IMF, their own banks, etc. Do you think that the European countries might see that as a way to reclaim their independence and their sovereignty? Jan.
Maybe first step could be cooperation between reformed European Union and BRIC. And then, if European Union would continue this philosophy, different philosophy from the philosophy of BRIC on member countries, then individual countries like Hungary or even Slovakia, one day they could apply even for or change their membership in EU into membership in BRIC.
Kostas, what do you think?
Well, I think that the BRICS movement is not only an antagonist of Washington and the Western world. We have to see the universal picture of BRICS. BRICS is expanding in Latin America and Africa and Asia, with the exception of the European Union and North America. So I think that the BRICS will not only strive for a multiple growth of economies and independence of each country which is a member or a prospect member of BRICS. If I had to discover a slogan for a small country like Greece, like my country, in order to sometime in the future try to become related to the BRICS, either directly or indirectly, my slogan would be, let me breathe. And I say that independence is a very necessary prerequisite for the BRICS to keep growing. And this is, I think, the real secret of the BRICS. That is why they're so successful. They do not apply colonialist or imperialist policies among each other, which is much more different than the junior partners and the senior partners, the Western world, Washington and Brussels, where you have the vassals and the masters. And you see this in the political leaders of the European Union. So and the last thing I want to mention is that I do see this in the United Nations with major BRICS powers who constantly work in a very subtle and a very methodical way in trying to restructure the United Nations. The United Nations cannot continue to exist like they do today. They have to be completely reformed and restructured to represent a new global reality of powers, big nations, medium nations, and smaller nations. This is not representative of the United Nations today. So I see the BRICS not only struggling for the people and the nations within BRICS, but even for the nations and the people outside of the BRICS. So this is how we must see, we who are outside the BRICS, ourselves in this relationship, to create a new world situation where, as Blaz mentioned, you will not have obscure dictatorial colonialist moneylenders like the central banks, which are really a tool of power to dominate other people on how they, not only how they live, but how they think. So the big picture for the BRICS is to become more bold in the near future, be broader, and not include only the global south, which are they including, but also the global north, which is our region in the world, or the medium, let's say, European or Balkan nations. So I think that the BRICS do have a perspective to let nations and peoples breathe. And this is a necessity today for humanity.
Thank you, Kostas. Blaž.
Well, there are some good things to be said about BRICS and some more skeptical ones. I think we all agree that the positive points about BRICS are that basically so far we can see that the main BRICS countries like Russia and China respect other countries' sovereignty, which is very important. To say simply, if one country in Africa or one country in Slovenia, in Europe, Slovenia, knows what it wants, I think intelligent conversation could be held with Russians or Chinese. What are the common interests? What to do? How to develop? And I feel this kind of spirit is still present. But I'm a little bit worried because the name BRICS as such has been created by globalist corporations. It's not coming from the global south. Now China is one of the most important and now the main economic power has played a very strategic role in initiating and implementing COVID-19 project. What does it mean? It means that there is hope for humanity of the world if BRICS will start to differentiate itself from Agenda 2030 globalist policies. And it has not been done so far. Now, to be a little bit nasty, not like Victoria Nuland, but in a more positive way, we have all carefully listened to the interview of Tucker Carlson and President Putin. But I'm surprised that nobody caught the phrase which was very clearly formulated by President Putin. He said, we're all bourgeois. Why are you behaving so badly against us? What does it mean? He's a very serious person. If we take a political system, the parliamentary system of Russia, for instance, it is a classical global liberal democratic parliamentary setup, very open to the influence of neoliberalism. So the big money through political parties play decisive role. These mechanisms are there in China, in India, in Russia, everywhere. But let's be hopeful. I think that so far also in the United Nations, the coordination of BRICS has resulted in some positive alliances, and that people of those countries of Russia, China, India will gradually develop more active approach to their national governments, which will have to work predominantly for their own citizens and then cooperate with the rest of the world.
Wow. Thank you, Blaž, for that realistic, skeptical observation. I agree with you. There's so much hope and promise in BRICS, but then there are some red lights that are warning signs to those of us who think that the globalists are not going to be in charge. Hendrik, your thoughts?
I try to give a very short answer. I'm a little bit pessimistic. I think European Union countries will be the last countries in the world to wake up. And Germany is maybe the red light in the end. So I don't think that... I think these countries first have to go completely down to wake up to find out that maybe BRICS or another constellation would be a better future for them.
Well, I have the same hope for the United States. I think before any change and reform can happen, it has to completely collapse. And all the people have to feel the pain, much like did the Russian Soviet people after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And fortunately, with, I think, inspired leadership, like the phoenix, they rose from the ashes. With the time we have left, and I always appreciate our conversations with each of you. And as a group, I think it's really fantastic. But I have to ask you this. The United States government has just continued with legislation that is going to allow the United States government to continue spying on its own citizens without a warrant. Now, I know each of you is going to remember a number of years ago during the Obama administration when he was accused of spying on Angela Merkel and Dilma Rousseff of Brazil. And the world was shocked. But Edward Snowden warned us all about NASA, not the space organization, but the National Administration, Security Administration, whatever that is, that they are collecting information on all of us continuously. We are all connected in the cybersphere. Everything we do, they can grab, and they do grab and preserve it. What are your thoughts? Henrik, start with you. What are your thoughts on the United States doing this and continuing to do this to not only American citizens, but your own citizens and your own government leaders? Henrik.
What should I say? I don't think it's any surprise at all. We all know this, and everybody who wants to know who can find out really easy. Only have a look on the internet to find out what's going on. Yeah, we all are connected through our phones, computers, and whatever. It is only more and more things we have at home. We're connected to the internet, so we are spied 24 hours a day. What I would like is, when I think about me personally, I would like that, for example, Russia or China, or for example, the European Union or European countries would come up with their own platforms. Of course, also these platforms can be spied on from US intelligence, but we have nothing. Facebook, YouTube, all these platforms are owned by American corporations. They are cooperating again with the US intelligence. So we have nothing in the whole European Union. I think there is no platform, no internet connection or something where you are independent from US governmental things or platforms. And also Russia is not doing anything. They have, for example, a YouTube platform, but it's not in English. Even it's owned by Gazprom, they could easily invest some millions of rubles to make this platform more international, available and usable for people in Europe, for example, but they are not doing anything. So we are in a really difficult situation, and the only thing we can do is to go out, make a mountain trip, and leave your phone in the car. That's the only way not to get spied on, unfortunately.
And not use your credit card.
Of course.
Blush, what are your thoughts on this spying?
Well, about 10 years ago, Glenn Greenwald wrote a book, No Place to Hide, where he described the Edward Snowden project And very simply, and it's all full of PDF, PowerPoints and so on, how Five Eyes agencies are bragging among themselves that they control and store absolutely all electronic traffic from all over the world. And it's in Utah. This is the biggest computer in the world, and everything is stored. So, as Hendrik said, it really is no surprise. But we are progressing in a wrong direction, I think. And we have to establish that United States government is in war with its citizens, and it is under command of globalists. And no election can help solving this controversy. Some speak of revolution, but I see such initiatives more as subversive provocations. Many of us would probably agree that the situation is so bad that substantial change would be welcome. But in order to productively speak about change, a serious political analysis must be performed. SWOT analysis, if you want, defining strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities. In order to do that, we must have a common understanding of what is good, what is not good, what we want, what we don't want. And human society has developed a solution for that. It's called a constitution. So far, the only organizational form for constitution to be meaningfully implemented is a national state. If a national state does not serve its citizens, nothing can. And now we hear, for instance, NPR boss from the States speaking of constitutional protection of free speech as an obstacle. So the American citizens are the biggest threats to the government. So next step is abolition of constitutions at national states and one world headquarters. So this is the seriousness of situation we are in, and it's no surprise, and the direction of travel is wrong.
Well, thank you, Blaž. Kostas, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that the progress of technology is not only a question of spying on ordinary citizens, or perhaps not only ordinary citizens, but even citizens with a high level of power, whether in economy or politics. That is why we are facing today the end of investigation in journalism. Julian Assange is perhaps the biggest example in our days. Investigation of journalism is not welcomed in the United States or in the Western world. I would say even in a global aspect also. That is one thing. And the other thing is that we lack complete defense, either legal, civic, or political, as citizens, from not only spies, but from algorithms, from the use of technology, from their use of chips in our heads, which is something that is not so much far away. I mean, it's being already put into testing. So Aldous Huxley is always in my mind with his Brave New World, where you have superhumans, medium average humans, and slave labor. And this is the world that is being created today, unfortunately to say. And I do agree with Blaž that the last defense is the creation of a state which guarantees its citizens complete freedom from manipulation of thought, of action, of political and civil action. And this is the real danger we're facing today as a human race. And this is a big philosophical thing that we have to approach. It's not only a question of politics. We have to rediscover philosophy. When philosophy does not exist in a political system, the political system is a necrophile. It's dead. It only looks to the past. So in agreement with Blaž, because we're Balkans and we love philosophy very much, I think that philosophy is part of our thought and actions that must be very, very active and aggressive today. The worst question you can make to a sold out political leader, whether it's Borrell or von der Leyen or whoever, is to ask him about a philosophical thought that he might have on a war, on nature, or on a child sleeping in the street. He will have no answer. He cannot answer.
Thank you, Kostas. Insights you aren't going to get in many other places, but we have them here. Jan, your thoughts?
Regis, I would answer in two parts. One part is, say, philosophical. Yes, such practice, of course, it is hurting of freedom, hurting of law, but I would not like to be engaged in prosecuting it because I would consider it as a losing of time for myself. But another people should do it. Another second part is, say, practical. I have started as dissident in communist time, and I did know that communist secret service is eavesdropping me and would like to me about me everything almost. And I did know that about say 10% of informations I have should be kept secret in front of especially of secret services, even maybe of other persons. This 10% of informations I should keep secret in say in my hands by myself, and another this 90% of informations, please, they could they could know it.
Well, thank you, Jan, Kostas, Blush, Henrik, for another very interesting, intriguing, and I think very educational show. I'm so grateful to having each of you to participate in these discussions. As I mentioned, you are providing insights that I don't think are found in too many other places. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you. All the best.